Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, for a two-day state visit. His trip coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties between China and Vietnam. Vietnam is the first stop on President Xi's three-nation Southeast Asian tour, which will also take him to Malaysia and Cambodia for state visits from Tuesday to Friday. Chinese President Xi Jinping says he looks forward to having an in-depth exchange of views with Vietnamese leaders on issues concerning ties between the two parties and countries. President Xi made the remarks in a written statement upon his arrival at the Noi Bai International Airport in Vietnam's capital, Hanoi. The Chinese president is on a two-day state visit to Vietnam. In his written statement, President Xi says China and Vietnam are socialist neighbors and a community of a shared future, which holds strategic significance. We're looking at pictures coming in from Hanoi, Vietnam, where we believe a welcome ceremony will soon be rolled out in honor of the visiting Chinese president. Stay with CGTN. We'll bring you more details on our program. And as you know, this year marks the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Vietnam, as well as the China-Vietnam Year of People-to-People exchanges. Again, you're looking at pictures coming in from Hanoi, Vietnam, where a welcome ceremony is being held to receive the visiting Chinese president. The president, of course, flew in this morning, arriving just a few hours ago in Hanoi, beginning the first stop on his three-nation tour to Southeast Asia. Watching here in our studio with me is Chu Qian Fellow at the Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, and Einar Tengen, Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asian Narratives. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. We're watching, of course, this welcome ceremony unfold there at the Presidential Palace in Hanoi, Vietnam, where the Chinese president will be received by the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee and Vietnam's president. If you look at the frequency of official exchanges at the highest level between China and Vietnam, it's rather frequent. I mean, the last time the Chinese president was in Vietnam was in 2023. It was the end of 2023, so we're talking about another visit in less than 2 years' time. Einar, what does that tell us about the level of political mutual trust and official exchanges?
And there was a visit by the General Secretary to China in 2022. And then you take in ASEAN, where there's been a lot of activity. So at this point, I mean, it's very clear that there's a strong economic cooperation. But in the past, there have been some issues in terms of frictions, and President Xi is addressing those directly. And this is really kind of interesting, is that he's not putting anything aside. He says, here are the basics of two countries that share a revolutionary past. Now, that is very different from perhaps the other letters that he has written in the past when he's gone to different countries. He's stressing something a little bit different there, this commonality that they struggled against colonialism. And I think that's something that people need to kind of factor in when they're going about this. Otherwise, it's the same. Win-win cooperation, people-to-people exchanges. There are 6 areas of economic development and investment that they're looking at, railways and ports and all this type of thing. So it looks to be a very positive visit, and one that is expressing stability in the midst of, let us say, uncertainty coming from other quarters.
And Mr. Chu, the red carpet is rolled out, and we just saw the marching band enter the ceremony, getting ready to welcome the Chinese president. Behind all that pomp and pageantry, Mr. Chu, what is your take on where both countries stand right now? Einar mentioning a focus on economic cooperation, obviously building on years of brotherhood and neighborliness. The two countries are regarded as both comrades and brothers. You can trace those remarks to late Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, who famously said that more than 50 years ago. What is your take on where both sides stand?
Well, Zhengshi, I really like all this because I have two keywords. Number one is called long-termism. Number two is called strategic relation. Why is that? It's because probably a lot of people are not so familiar with Chinese-Vietnam relations in the past, like 75 years. Actually, the top leadership has been paying frequent visit to each other. For example, the Chairman Ho Chi Minh used to pay visit to Chairman Mao Zedong. They can talk to each other in their local dialect. Very good friendship. So there is a saying ever since that time in Vietnam and also in China. It's called Việt Nam và Trung Quốc, đồng chí và anh em. It means Vietnam and China, comrade plus brothers. So that been forging a very solitude relations between each other. And also in the 1980s, I think when Vietnam started their Doi Mai means the Vietnam version of the Reform and Opening Arm since the General Secretary Nguyen Van Linh. So they've been saying, okay, China is developing really fast, and Mr. Deng Xiaoping is doing a wonderful job. So many leaders like Jiang Zemin, like Lê Tuc Anh, those leaders are paying attention. They're telling the General Secretary Nguyen and say, okay, we should actually go to China and see what they're doing, and probably is good for long-term development for Vietnam as well. So ever since that time, the bilateral visit has been also very frequent and also on a very high level. And also since that, I think the General Secretary Nong Tak Man and also everybody probably are very familiar with General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong, and they've been paying very high level and frequent visit to China. And also very recently, Mr. Dolan also paid visit to China. And I think it shows this long-termism, this comrade plus a brotherhood actually been serving as a foundation of both of our bilateral relations. And I think this relation comes first, and second comes for the international trade and economic cooperation, as been witnessed right now. China and Vietnam actually are witnessing a double-digit growth in economic cooperation. Talking about trade, we've been going surpass 260 billion US dollar already, and this number has already been mounting at a double-digit speed in the last 10 years. And also China has been mounting to the number 3 investment partner with Vietnam. And also it's been speeding up. In the newly increased investment, I think, between China and Vietnam, China has already been mounting to more than 1/3. So these numbers keep on adding up. So I think because of that, I think both countries have more reasons to talk to each other in a long-termism, in a long-term vision, and also in a strategic level. I think that's the reason why both of our leaders just come together very frequently to visit each other and are talking about the two countries' future. And I think more than that is more than just two countries' future. This bilateral relations actually been serving, both China and ASEAN nations relation. And also this whole plus, this combo has also been serving the Eastern Asian region plus ASEAN nation. And also whole Eastern Asian, the bigger Eastern Asian regions development, ASEAN, Japan, South Korea, China. We've been putting together a very vibrant market / supply chain serving the whole world market. In the past 20 years, this region has been growing basically at 10% of the speed, averagely 8% a year. It's much faster than the average development speed of many other regions. And also, its whole economic size has been mounting to more than 30% of the whole world, getting very close to 40%. So I would like to say this is not only strategic for both China and Vietnam, but also for the whole world.
I'm rather impressed with your grasp of Vietnamese.
And his pronunciation is perfect.
Well, yeah, you're one to talk. That's beautiful.
Oh, of the Vietnamese, I was really impressed. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. The perfect guest to have on. And if you're just joining us on CGTN this hour, we're looking at pictures in Hanoi of a welcome ceremony held in the honor of the visiting Chinese president. It looks like final preparation is now in full swing. Our reporter Chen Mengfei is watching all of this unfold in Hanoi for us. Mengfei, what do you have for us this hour?
Indeed, President Xi Jinping arrived earlier today to the highest level of reception at the airport. He was greeted by the president, and now he's about to arrive at the presidential palace, where he will be greeted by the top leader of Vietnam, General Secretary To Lam. They will have various topics of talks, and there will be various activities, some about business, some about cultural, people-to-people exchange ties. Earlier today, President Xi Jinping published this article in local press in which he called for advancing of bilateral ties. He talked about specifically increasing cooperation in industrial and supply chains. He mentioned elaborating cooperation in emerging fields such as artificial intelligence, green development, and 5G. So we'll be watching closely whether some announcement agreements in these areas will emerge following these high-level talks. Back to you, Zhongshi.
All right, Mo-Fei, thank you so much for standing by for us. We'll be checking in with you throughout our broadcast this afternoon. We're looking at pictures coming in from Hanoi, Vietnam, where a welcome ceremony is being rolled out to welcome and receive the visiting Chinese President. Xi Jinping has got a very packed schedule over there, 2 days in Vietnam as the state visit, the first leg of his three-nation tour in Southeast Asia. Let's pick up our conversation with my guests here in the studio. Under the piece published in Vietnamese press by the Chinese president highlights the revolutionary solidarity between the two countries in their shared struggles against colonialism. How does this historical context influence diplomatic relations today? Obviously, they have a lot to reflect back on and that they can build their relations on.
Well, I mean, it's not unsubtle in pointing out that you have another nation that's trying to reassert a neo-colonial future. Basically said to Vietnam, you have to knuckle under. There's not about compromise or coming to some solution. We're going to dictate and you're going to either follow. But what was telling about that is that there was this issue about non-tariff list of things that Vietnam was supposed to do, that Peter Navarro, the economic advisor of the president, which in essence said you have to stop trading with China. Well, 60% of Vietnamese goods have components from China. So it would decimate their economy. And I think this is a reminder that, ASEAN, China, both historically and, as was pointed out, economically, have a unity of interest. And, if you want to point to one of the poster children for the Belt and Road Initiative, it would definitely have to be Vietnam, because they have benefited from the downstreaming of Chinese companies going outside of China because they're looking for lower costs and things like that, and additional ports. There are geopolitical elements to that. But these are all things kind of coming together. And I hate to say it, but without Donald Trump, it would never have been possible.
I mean, it's hard to miss all of the context that this state visit is happening right now with China and Vietnam, both big regional manufacturing hubs, both big exporters to the United States. Are they in a position to work together? I mean, obviously they're standing together. Are they in a position to work together against unilateralism, trade bullion?
Well, it's not for the first time, right? We've done this before, and I pleased to remind everybody we win last time. Well, I don't think this is the focal point of this visit. I still remember my two keywords: long-termism. It's a strategic relation between two nations. As you just mentioned, well, a lot of people are saying, okay, these are two most important manufacturers of the whole world. And also, they have been exporting a lot. But still, you need to focus on that China itself has 1.4 billion of population. And Vietnam right now are having more than 100 million population. And their average age is, below 25 years old. Please, pay attention. These are two of the fastest growing market itself. Consumption, that's what we're talking about. So I think there are two misunderstandings in here. A lot of people say, okay, this is the moment because of the turbulence are happening, so the two countries need to talk to each other immediately. No, I don't think so. That's been planned for a very, very long time before, because, the last General Secretary, Nguyen Phu Trong, used to visit China. We have talking about the connectivities of Belt and Road, talking about the two corridors in one circle. This has already been planned. We have infrastructure things to talk about, energy issues to talk about, green development things to talk to each other. So this, I think, is the beginning point of everything. And I think, secondly, a lot of people saying that China is trying to release the capacity to Vietnam, utilizing their resources like human resources and etc. I don't think that's the answer, because if you pay attention enough, or if you go to visit Vietnam, you'll find out that the Chinese technology transfer to Vietnam is actually happening a lot. So in Vietnam, they have a national plan. In China, we have that new quality development forces, the Chinese style modernization, right? This is our China thing. But for Vietnam, they also have their own ambitious target. For example, like the digital Vietnam, like the modernization of the Vietnam style. And that requires Vietnam to fast upgrade their whole economy. And they find out that China is actually a perfect partner to do things together. So right now, if you go to Vietnam, they have their own brand of the EV coming up very, very fast and very popular among the ASEAN nations. And also, they've been catching very fast in energy supply, for example, the green energies. And also, talking about the trade, a lot of people say, okay, China is just to export to Vietnam, and Vietnam then export to other places like America. No, that's not the truth. Because if you work in the supply chain, you will find out that this has already become its original market itself. For example, China will export the TV screens to Vietnam. And a lot of people will find out also Vietnam will export a lot of TV screen back into China. You probably will ask, what's wrong with that? Why they're exporting TV screens back and forth? But the thing is, China will export the smaller ones and the cheaper ones to Vietnam, so they can make the mobile phones or smaller monetary screens for the lower end market. But also Vietnam are outsourcing fee for South Korean companies like Samsung to build very high quality screens, so export back to China. So China will.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe the president's motorcade has arrived at the presidential palace in Hanoi, Vietnam. The Chinese president flew in earlier today, a couple of hours ago, landing in Hanoi, beginning the first leg of his tour, three-nation tour in Southeast Asia. If you're just joining us here on CGTN, you're looking at pictures coming out of Hanoi, Vietnam, where a welcome ceremony is being held at the presidential palace to receive the visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping. And we're awaiting, the president's motorcade has pulled up to the presidential palace. We are moments away from seeing the Chinese president. He will be meeting with Vietnamese leaders. This is the fourth time Xi Jinping is visiting Vietnam as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee and also as Chinese president. He will be meeting with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, To Lam, and the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Nguyen Xuan. All of this is happening at the presidential palace in Hanoi. The palace is used as the workplace of the state president, and important activities of the party and state are also held there. National anthems from both countries being played at the welcome ceremony. The Chinese president arrived in Hanoi, Vietnam, just a couple of hours ago to begin the first leg of his three-nation Southeast Asian tour. His trip coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Vietnam. He'll be meeting with top Vietnamese officials, including General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, To Lam, and the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Leon Tran. Einar, China has emphasized that it wants to work on the relations with neighboring countries in its peripheral diplomatic affairs, and has said Vietnam is a priority in that front. Why is Vietnam a priority?
Well, it's a position that it plays in ASEAN. It's a neighbor. Obviously, has this long coast. It's it's booming. It's going forward, and like a lot of other things, it's not ASEAN kind of goes forward together. What helps one helps the other. And Vietnam, there's the railway project. There's also this new port, a modernized port, kind of like the one in Peru, in Chanche. These are things that will make Vietnam more competitive.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Einar. We're looking at the welcome ceremony ongoing at the presidential palace in Hanoi, Vietnam. We just heard the national anthems being played there at the ceremony. And the visiting Chinese president will be meeting with top Vietnamese officials, including General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, To Lam, and the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Leon Tran. Of course, as you heard just now, this trip comes as China and Vietnam celebrate 75 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations. China says Xi's two-day state visit aims to enhance strategic mutual trust, deepen practical cooperation, and work for sustained and steady progress in the building of the China-Vietnam community with a shared future. We've been telling you this on our broadcast. China and Vietnam are socialist friends and neighbors. Both countries are advancing the cause of reform and transformation that suit their own national conditions. They have also been strengthening solidarity and cooperation for the shared interests of both sides. At the end of 2023, General Secretary and President Xi Jinping paid a visit to Vietnam, opening a new chapter of a China-Vietnam community with a shared future. Since last year, General Secretary Xi Jinping and General Secretary To Lam have maintained strategic communication. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says there have been close exchanges between various departments and localities and fruitful outcomes in cooperation in various fields. In a recent interview, Chinese ambassador to Vietnam, He Wei, highlighted two defining moments in bilateral ties. We believe the leaders are getting ready to inspect the honor guards at the welcome ceremony. And we continue to bring you the latest on the Chinese president's state visit to Vietnam. So the Chinese ambassador to Vietnam has previously said that the first defining moment was the traditional friendship of comrades plus brothers, personally established by late Chairman Mao Zedong and late Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, who laid the roots of this friendship. The second was the establishment of the China-Vietnam community with a shared future by Xi Jinping, together with the late Vietnamese leader Nguyen Phu Trong, an incumbent To Lam, which instilled the soul of long-lasting friendship. We're talking about the economic and trade aspect of this bilateral relationship, and I hope to bring you more on that also later in our program. But we can tell you that economic and trade ties between China and Vietnam are expected to rise to a new level, driven by the two countries' complementary trade structures, Vietnam's modernization drive, and the growing influence of RCEP. Leaders from both sides are making their way closer to the palace. This is a welcome ceremony rolled out to receive and honor the visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping. Their bilateral trade has exceeded $200 billion for 4 consecutive years, demonstrating the steady progress of economic and trade ties. In 2024, bilateral trade reached $260.65 billion, up 13.5% year on year. And Vietnam remains a key destination for Chinese foreign direct investment, with Chinese enterprises investing over $2.5 billion in Vietnam in the same year, maintaining a robust growth rate. And since 2004, China has been Vietnam's largest trading partner. Since 2016, Vietnam has been China's largest trading partner within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Again, all of this is taking place at the Presidential Palace in Hanoi, which is used as the workplace of the state president. And important activities of the party as well as state are also held there. Built in 1900 and completed in 1906, it was ranked 6th on the list of the top 13 most beautiful presidential palaces in the world, as voted by Architectural Digest. Again, this visit is taking place as China and Vietnam celebrate 75 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations. So a lot of significance riding on how the two countries are expected to elevate their ties even further. General Secretary Xi Jinping will hold talks with To Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee. The Chinese president is also set to meet Vietnam's President Loan Tran, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, and Chairman of the National Assembly Tran Thanh Man. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says Xi's 2-day state visit aims to enhance strategic mutual trust, deepen practical cooperation, and work for sustained and steady progress in the building of the China-Vietnam community with a shared future. We heard a lot about the characterization of the two countries, both socialist countries. Comrade and brother are what late Chinese and Vietnamese leaders described their relations, and obviously that sets a foundation for the two countries. Gentlemen, let's talk about what is happening today. We talk about elevating this bilateral relationship even higher. What does that mean? What does that look like at this point, Einar?
Well, it's trust. It's a railway project that's going to change the gauge of Vietnam, allow it to be more efficient. You can hang on to a narrow gauge, I'm talking about the tracks and the width of them, but in the end it'll be more expensive. By signing on, it's not about which one is, it's not national important, it's just simply to go forward. But in terms of going, China is willing to share technology. China is willing to help Vietnam build its infrastructure so it's independent. These are things that are not possible if you're talking about other countries, especially the West. They would not be interested in doing that because it would be a competitive threat. So as long as Vietnam is still a massive export country, it's always going to come under pressure from the West, whereas it's going to get encouragement from the East.
I mean, talking about the Belt and Road Initiative between China and Vietnam, there has been success with, for example, a light rail line in Hanoi, Line 2. What more can you expect in the future? Is it still on the infrastructure side, or are we talking about, more railways, smart ports? What are we looking at?
Of course, this is going to happen a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. Talking about the railways, well, actually you have to understand the geography of Vietnam is actually a very, very narrow, a little bit like Chile. So, the basic economic activity and population has been gathered in two parts. Number one is the Red River, plain, and another is in the Ho Chi Minh area. So, in between is a very, very narrow territory. For very, very long history, they do not have a high-speed rail or heavy cargo railway linkage between each other. So, between the two nations, between the two regions, you basically need a high-speed highway, and also you need the airplane, to travel from each other. Between each other. But right now, I think the situation is going to be changed. For example, within Vietnam, I think a Chinese company has already been signed a contract with the local government to build a railway. It's basically going through the whole territory of Vietnam. For example, we will have the Long Son to Hanoi, railway linking from the north part of very close to China to Hanoi, which is the center city in the north part of the river plain, and also the capital city for sure. And also we're going to build the railway linking the Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City. So also going through in between, we have the Da Nang, have the Hue, and all these cities will be linked in together. So for the first time in Vietnam, you can expect between 1,500 kilometers, you will have both the high-speed rail as well as the heavy cargo train to go between each other. So this is going to be revolutionary, not only in this country's history, but also in this country's economic development. And also thirdly, I think between among very large cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh cities, and also Da Nang, they will have many other like the subways, metros has been happening a lot. And more important than that is that they will build this whole network in the railways linked to the northern part of China between Guangxi autonomous region and the northern part of Vietnam, linking through the Long Son to Haiphong to Ho Chi Minh City, to Hanoi, and then Ho Chi Minh City. So you will see a literal physical network supply chain will be forming in the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, gentlemen, do stay with me here. I'll be back with you in just a moment. CGTN reporter Chen Mengfei is live in Hanoi with us. Mengfei, we just watched a full-on welcome ceremony unfold at the presidential palace in Hanoi, Vietnam. What more can you tell us?
Yes, Zhongshi, it was a very nice ceremony, and earlier our colleague spoke to people who were waiting outside of the presidential palace. The older generation really have this fond memory of the close ties between China and Vietnam throughout all these years. But today, as President Xi Jinping mentioned in his article published in the newspaper, that this relationship is not just rooted in history, but also rooted in really fruitful cooperation throughout all these years. In the past few years, we're here in Hanoi, and we've met so many young people who are studying Chinese here. And that's because for a very practical reason is that, if they can work for a Chinese company, they might have 20 to 30% higher salary. And also a lot of the Chinese companies that are coming to Vietnam, they have factories, but you also have state-owned enterprises who are these huge businesses. You also have leading tech companies from China, such as Tencent, Alibaba, all have their presence here in Vietnam. And by working for these companies, it's a great way for local workforce to upscale their skills. It's for Vietnam to upgrade. So we're really seeing increasing ties, not just for cultural, historical, emotional reasons, but also for very practical reasons here in Hanoi. And people really feel the benefits. So that's why they are excited about the further advancing of the bilateral ties.
Well, I appreciate that update from you. Thank you so much. Also, my colleague Li Qiuyuan spoke to Truan Thanh Nguyen, an anchor at Vietnam's VTV International channel for the Vietnamese perspective on diplomatic relations with China.
Last year, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, To Lam, chose China as the destination for his first overseas visit after taking office. Tell us more about how Vietnam defines and perceives its bilateral ties with China.
Thank you, Chiu Yuan, for your question. Now, to answer it, allow me to point out that at the high-level talks with General Secretary and President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, in Beijing on August 19, 2024, that Party General Secretary To Lam affirmed that Vietnam always values and gives top priority to the friendly, neighborly relationship and the comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership, a community with a shared future of strategic significance with China. And it is great to see that since establishment of the Comprehensive Strategic Cooperative Partnership Framework in 2008, that bilateral relations have seen strong, comprehensive, and outstanding developments across many fields. Now, today, China has been Vietnam's largest trading partner for 20 consecutive years. And you know that China is also Vietnam's second largest importer in the world. Last year, economic and trade cooperation reached a new peak, surpassing $200 billion according to Vietnamese statistics, and $260 billion according to Chinese figures. And I would like to emphasize that Vietnam remains China's largest trading partner in ASEAN and its fourth largest trading partner globally. So I think that we both believe that the state visit to Vietnam by General Secretary and President Xi Jinping from April 14th to 15th marks an important diplomatic and political event for both parties and countries. It holds a strategic significance and long-term impact on the development of Vietnam-China relations in a context where both nations are entering a new era and new phase of development.
And over the years, the two nations have deepened cooperation across trade and diplomacy. Beijing residents have shared about their personal connections to Vietnam.
When I think of Vietnam, I think of Ho Chi Minh City.
I think of the Mekong River.
Vietnam strikes me as a country of great food. I'm a big fan of pho. It's one of the best dishes. I also love Vietnamese spring rolls.
I think of sunshine, beaches, Vietnamese drip coffee, and their excellent seafood. I've been to Nha Tram. It's a perfect holiday destination with a long coastline. Everything about culture and atmosphere is so pleasant.
I think of Spring Festival traditions, since Vietnam celebrates it too. I've never visited, but I used to work at TikTok and have collaborated with some Vietnamese social influencers online. I hope to meet them in person one day.
The scenery, the beauty, the food, everything is wonderful. I visited Nha Trang a couple of months ago and loved experiencing local life and the stunning sea views. It was unforgettable.
I think of trending Vietnamese songs these days, and of course the food. I'm obsessed with pho. I plan to go to Vietnam on my next trip and will definitely hit the beaches. Vietnamese people are very friendly to us. I can't wait for this journey.
Let's return to my guests here in the studio, Chu Qiang and Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, let's look at China-Vietnam in the context of China-ASEAN. In recent years, China and ASEAN have expanded cooperation in trade, connectivity, and disaster response. How does the shared future framework, Einar, help deepen mutual trust and strengthen regional integration?
Well, it's two parts to it. One, this has been going on for a long period of time. Remember, Donald Trump was not planning these tariffs 75 years ago. So as you pointed out, this has been a long time in the making. People should not make the mistake that this is a reaction to anything else. This is a positive plan that China's been working with on the Belt and Road Initiative for a long period of time. There's been $1 trillion put into it. So this is not a flash in the pan. This talks about regionalism. And it's happening in part because of the absence of the ability of the WTO to work fully. Why? Because the United States doesn't allow the appointment of appellate judges, so there can be no finality if anybody appeals any of the rulings. So I'd like to hear from my colleague because he's a lot better at this.
Yes, please do.
Well, thank you, Einar. You've been so humble. Actually, I think this is actually very, very important moment for the two countries to sit together to talk about our both long-term and ambitious plan for the future, as well as been influencing China and ASEAN nations and the whole world supply chain. Well, look, China and Vietnam are, number one trading partner with each other. And meanwhile, I think Vietnam is also very important. I think the number one manufacturers in ASEAN nations right now. So this is the whole picture we're talking about. So like Annie just mentioned, right now it's very turbulent, right? There are lots of messages flowing around, and we've been seeing the probably headwind towards the global trade. But I think in the future, the globalization is not dying, even though WTO is not functioning as well as before. But still, we have the RCEPs. We have China-ASEAN plans together. And also,
how is the RCEP working out for Vietnam, by the way? I mean, Obviously, it has reduced the trade barriers, trade restrictions for Vietnam. How tangibly has Vietnam benefited from RCEP?
Well, from the RCEP, basically, they will have many most important imports and exports down to the zero with the tariffs. And also, this deal makes Vietnam more flexible and resilient in the supply chain. Well, let me, as just mentioned, ASEAN nations plus China, Japan, and South Korea are itself one of the largest market of the whole world. And this whole market has been growing very fast. So do not only pay attention to this supply chain as only a supplier, but also see it as a consumption future. In the future, I'm always saying that we're going to have globalization, but in a different way. I call it mosaic globalization or segregated globalization, which means China, ASEAN nations, China, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, we're going to form our own market in a good way. But meanwhile, okay, we're not going to shut down ourselves. Meanwhile, we're going to do trade with North America, with European Union, Africa, Latin America for sure. But meanwhile, we're going to tie together even closer than before to form our own market in consumption, technology, agriculture, services, anything you name it. So this is the future we're looking at. And if we can do that, I think this is actually ultimately a good news for the whole world economy because you still have some stability in the world supplying side. You also have some booming, increasing part in the global consumption market. We need this certainty to face uncertainty in the coming next 5 to 10 years.
And remember, there's going to be a meeting of the Arabic groups who will be coming in with ASEAN and China. This introduces a new element to this because there's a tremendous amount of money, a desire for investment. Obviously, the largest customers are here in Asia. So you see exactly what you said, this kind of growing regionalism.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. At the heart of the China-Vietnam border lies a natural wonder that transcends geography, the De Tien waterfall. But beyond its roaring waters, the zone pulses with something deeper, a tapestry of cultural exchange, of friendship, and shared traditions. Follow our reporter Xu Hua to the De Tien Bang Giok waterfall cross-border tourism cooperation zone to see what makes this place a living bridge between the two nations.
Hey guys, come and follow me. Take a look. Isn't this paradise on earth?
It is a paradise for me, and my first sight of the De Tien Bang Giok waterfall took my breath away. Within the same waterflow, the mist blurs borders.
No matter where you come from, music is a universal language. Listen to this.
People from China and Vietnam gather to celebrate what connects them: folk songs, laughters, and shared stories.
刚才唱的这首歌叫什么名字？
贝农情深，然后他那个是马豆曼楼嘞，来到我们的对，来到我们的村，来到我们的屯，个个都是兄弟姐妹，一起喝酒，一起唱歌。
Yes, friendship is the rhythm that bridges borders, and the costume culture too.
This is my first time attending a fashion show live. I feel truly honored to witness the ethnic design of China, the drum brocade.
Visitors aren't just captivated by the show, they're drawn to products like drum brocade, which are woven with stories.
这个是燕子的图案，代表的是健康，还有那种万物复苏、春天的感觉。这个是那个田地的纹样，它就代表着那种播种和希望。还有这个的话就是那个回字，它代表的是团圆，还有民族团结。
So, what could be more spectacular than an ordinary feast? Imagine 1,000-person table stretching into the distance, featuring Vietnamese and Chinese culinary masterpieces.
Vietnamese spring rolls beside Guangxi's 5-color sticky rice. This isn't just dinner, it's a culinary handshake. De Tien teaches us that borders are lines on the maps, but culture flows like water. Here, songs, clothes, and even Luo Sitheng remind us that friendship needs no translation. This is more than a tourist sport. It's a testament to harmony beyond boundaries. 徐华 CGTN 广西壮 Autonomous Region.
And that is it for our special coverage for now. Our thanks go out to our guests, Xu Qian Fellow at the Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, and Hanoi Tengen Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asia Narratives. And we appreciate your company as always. Thank you for watching. Stay with CGTN. News continues.